how emblematic. The basket is down, and unfortunately for the Wizards and their fans, it's down for the last time of the NBA season. A successful one it was, but Nikki, they fell to the Pacers in the end, 93-80. You covered the team throughout the year. You saw the growing pains of whatever. What's your reaction to the disappointment, but the positive side of the future for this team?
Well, I was very surprised at how well they came together towards the end in round one and round two, how well they won on the road. Disappointed at how they played at home because they were unable to pull out the wins at home, but they were killing on the road. So the ups and downs, they ended up being a really good season. And I think they gave the fans a good games from week to week.
And as we look about the future, Nikki, one of the things, I was here when the Wizards made it to the second round before when they beat Chicago. And then they got swept in the second round. But this perspective, this group, this foundation, looks like it's built for the long haul with Wall and Beal. The maturity that they have and the grace, and they got a chance to see that pain. The great ones all have to go through that. It hurts now, but it'll give them that drive to never want to go through this feeling again.
Exactly, and it was really good to see the veterans step in and really coach the young guys up. You could tell in the games on the floor, you would see Harrington and Goodman and Miller really patting them on the back, John and Bradley saying, you're doing a good job, keep going, keep pushing. And I think they needed that, and that's what helped them get over the hump into round two.
And Nikki, we got a chance to get some great interviews. We had Phil Chenier and Steve Buckhantz, and you also got Doris Burke. And we also had a chance to speak to a CSN duo that covered the Wizards throughout. We had the beat reporter Jay Michael, who covered the team throughout, as well as Glenn Consor, the radio voice. So let's get their very unique firsthand perspectives on the Wizards season. And now we're here with Jay Michael, beat reporter for the Wizards for CSN. Jay, how do you explain, as I asked Coach Whitman, a young team like this mastering how to win on the road? They go 5-1 on the road and 1-4 at home in this playoff series.
I really don't think there's an explanation for it. I mean, every time somebody tries to come up with a reason for why it happens, you know, it kind of varies. I just think it's a matter of focus. They tend to be a little bit better on the road, and actually that's a good thing, I think, long term, because winning in the NBA is tougher on the road, actually, than it is at home. So theoretically, you can figure out this home thing with the road thing already taken care of. You should be a really good team in the future seasons.
Now, it just happened. So what happens in the offseason? I mean, do you think it's any legitimacy to the talk of people questioning whether or not Witt will be back?
No, there's no legitimacy there. He's going to be back. You meet the edict from the owner to make the playoffs. You win 44 games. You're a number 5 seed. You make it to the East Conference semifinals. You win 2 games against the number 1 seed in the East. It's pretty much a slam dunk. The only question is how many years he's going to get. I think he'll get a 2-year deal with a 3rd-year team option, which seems to be reasonable. And plus, when you look at the other guys that are out there, people talk about Lionel Hollins, George Karl, they're going to be a lot more expensive.
Speaking about expensive, what do you do with Ariza and Gortat?
Both of those guys are probably going to come back. At least that's what the front office. Okay. I am told they positively are going to make an effort to try to bring them both back. A lot of people think it's one or the other, but it's not one or the other for one key reason. Number one, who's out there better than Trevor Ariza at his position? Who's going to be a free agent other than Marcin Gortat at center? Who's a better option than Gortat? The other reason is the salary cap is expected to go up by $3 million to give him that extra wiggle room to be able to make that work.
So what is your perspective on Bradley Beal's future role with this team along with John Wall?
Well, it's going to grow in the sense that he's going to be a little bit better player as long as he stays healthy. His role is going to get bigger and bigger. He's going to have to become a little bit better when it comes to creating his own shot off the dribble. But, you know, he's going to be going into his 3rd season when he's a number 3 overall pick. The first 2 years are guaranteed. He'll have a team option for the 3rd year, a team option for the 4th year. The Wizards going to pick up both of those and then eventually have the option to extend him after his 3rd season. So he's going to be here long term. The only question is his health. Is that stress injury going to take care of itself? Is he going to have any recurrences of that? That's the only thing that could be a hiccup in the plan with Bradley Beal.
And lastly, Jay, out of all of the positive things that came out of this, do you think that they'll finally get some love on national television next year?
Yeah, they had no national TV games. Which was kind of surprising. But then when you looked at some of the national perspective, once they made the playoffs, and a lot of people thinking that they were going to get beat in 4 or 5 games by the Chicago Bulls, I think that's a direct correlation with a lot of people nationally hadn't really seen this team. And I think when you look at the style of basketball they play well in open court. Give them the right matchup. It's an attractive team to watch. I think you'll see them on on national TV at least a couple times next year.
So the guys are going to get some rest. What are you going to do now that the season is over?
I'm not really going to get rest. I'm going to be going to Montreal next week.
Okay.
And then I'm going to be teaching a graduate class at Georgetown during the off season. So I'm going to be staying pretty busy.
Well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you spending some time with us.
No problem.
All right.
So I had the opportunity to catch up with Doris Burke. Please talk to me. Give me your professional perspective of tonight's game.
Well, I think Indiana looks like a team that's been here before, closeout opportunity on the road, and I think their level of disappointment from their performance in Game 5 has showed here in Game 6. The Wizards are young, and they've struggled here at home, which is an interesting conundrum. I thought it was important that they shoot the three ball well. They didn't. I think the second half they've got to start to shoot it well.
So they really need to work together as a team. We need to see that spark we saw in Indiana just 2 nights ago. And I think they'll be able to walk away with the win tonight. But I'm looking at the game tonight, and we're not doing the same. They're not executing the same way tonight. Is that what you see as well?
Well, it's interesting. Hubie Brown and Mike Tirico were talking about exactly that. Sometimes the spark can come from somebody who's a surprise, maybe good and off the bench as he did earlier in the series. It doesn't matter where it comes from, but they need a spark for sure.
I'm joined by Brian Jackson from CSN. Give me your professional perspective of tonight's game.
Well, so far it looks like the Wizards are just not really getting out in transition. Through the first half, they got 0 points in transition. Everything that they were doing in the half court is really getting contested, and if they don't really get any fast break points here in the second half, they're going to be going home.
It is definitely a different team we saw from the other night in Indiana. Can we say that they're a better road team than a home team?
Yeah, I think it's really a mental thing. Marcin Gortat was saying before last game day, kind of wishes that they were going to stay out on the road because they've just 1-3 here at Verizon Center during the playoffs this season. So I really think it's just more of a mental thing that's kind of hanging them up so far.
I'm here with Dave Owens. Please talk to me about your perspective on this year, this season with the Washington Wizards, going into the playoffs, round 1, round 2, and tonight.
You know what, Nikki, when I look back on this campaign, you can't help but be encouraged with what you saw. I don't think anybody thought really that the Wizards would be in this position at this point. I mean, you go back to the beginning of the year, you thought, okay, John Wall is healthy, these guys are going to play pretty well. But I don't think a lot of people thought they'd be in the second round of the playoffs. It's a heck of a run for this basketball team. Disappointing here tonight, no doubt, but they've got a bright future, no doubt.
Yes, and like you said, no one expected them to get this far, and then the up and the downs with the Indiana Pacers winning in Indiana and not able to pull out the win here at home.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on them not being able to win as many home games as they did road games?
It's a process. I mean, this is a young team that's going through it, learning how to win in the playoffs. I think sometimes when you're that young team, it's easier sometimes to go on the road because it's that us against, the world mentality. It's something you learn in AAU ball in your comeuppance, and you could tell young teams kind of catch on to that sooner. But I think when you're at home and you're favored, that's a different feeling, and they've got to learn that, and they've got to be more consistent. But again, overall, this is a group that can be very encouraged with what they have moving forward.
Thank you.
The broadcast team of Phil Chenier and Steve Buckhantz and our very own Glenn Consor. So check out their perspectives on the Wizards. And now it's our distinct pleasure to be with the dynamic broadcast team for the Wizards/Bullets, Steve Buckhantz and Phil Chenier. Guys, they aren't letting you work, but it's still got to be great to experience this, because you've seen it all with this team.
You've been around a long time, too. It's fabulous. I mean, we remember when Gilbert played, and that was fun, and those were good teams. This is a different kind of a team, more well-rounded, I think. And the continuity is better, the makeup is better, and everybody's contributing. And I remember in '79 when that team went 3-1 and came back and won the series. So, yeah, it's fabulous.
And Phil, it's got to be awesome for you to see these two young guys grow up on a stage of this magnitude, but how are they going to take that calming effect of the road and even when things go south, still play through the tough times in this Game 6 at home?
Well, I mean, so far the whole team has handled that well, and they've been a part of that. Obviously, they've at times, I'm sure, leaned on some of the experience around them. Even you look at some of the coaching staff and Randy and Sam that have played in this league, but they've grown up very quickly. They've absorbed a lot. And it's fun to see that growth. I mean, anytime you see that development, that's pretty exciting.
Speaking about the development, how exciting must it be for you for them to not get any love nationally? And coming into the series after Game 1, all of the national pundits were jumping on the bandwagon.
Well, it's frustrating in a sense because after the first round, the local broadcast entities are not allowed to televise. It's the networks, and they pay a lot of money for exclusivity. So it's frustrating in that regard. We went all through the season, 82 games. We did 4 of the 5 games against Chicago, and then we're sort of on the sidelines. We got to pass it off, and so now we watch the game as fans do, and it's not a pretty sight. You don't want to be anywhere near either one of us watching these games as fans.
That's why I'm catching you guys beforehand. So what's it going to take for them to keep from ending this ride in front of their home fans?
More of the same. We saw a great Game 5. They played connected. Obviously, they had 2 guys that had 2 outstanding games, but they're capable of playing at that level. Obviously, John is. I was excited about John because I thought that he finally showed the shooting form that he showed all year long. And, it was outstanding, but it wasn't anything that was that much of a surprise, so I was happy for that. And then defensively, they have to continue to do the job. I don't know if we'll ever see a game where the rebounding was so distorted, but I'd love to see one more like that on our side, that is.
Buck, you were talking about the history. I mean, they had the 4 straight playoff runs, but that really was never one that was really on the cusp of a championship. With the makeup and character of this young group, how excited are you for the future and the building blocks are there for sustained success?
Well, going back to what you're talking about and the year they made it to the second round, which was 2005, I think it was a little disappointing because you were playing Miami, and we knew what Miami was back then, and the Wizards lost 4 straight games. This is a little different. If you're able to get past Indiana, which is still a big if, you got to win 2 games, you can compete against this Miami team this year. The Wizards beat them twice this season. So the future is very bright. You look at that backcourt, 20 years old in Beal, 23 in Wall. I mean, how can it get any better than what the future is going to bring here? We're very excited for that.
And the great thing about that future, it can't get any better than the dynamic team of you guys. I'm happy for you guys and appreciate you spending some time with us. And now we're here with the radio voice of the Wizards, Glenn Consor. Glenn, what are your immediate thoughts about the ride that this team was on and what the future beholds for them?
You know, I think about where the organization was, and you and I used to talk about that a lot, and to where it is right now. It's just amazing. I mean, the dramatic improvement of this team, the foundation is set. And I think about also Bradley Beal and John Wall, how much they've improved from last year. John has learned the when to do things. He still has a lot of polish left, but he's learned. Bradley Beal is, to me, is going to be, and mark my words now, and he's going to be the best 2 guard in the NBA next year. I'm just telling you, if he stays healthy, he will be. So you think about the improvement of those 2 guys, and Nene stays healthy, this team is really, I think the foundation is set to become one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference next year.
Now, you've been here. What do you think about the craziness of the noise of people on the outside questioning whether or not Whit will be back after what he's done with this ball club?
I don't respond. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, you know, they could have easily went to the Eastern Conference Finals. So what, do you let him go? No, he's a good coach, and he got the most out of this team.
Right. Now, in the offseason, and talking about Brad and John, they're too young to remember, but Michael Jordan, Isaiah, they all had to go through the hurt before they could get through that next one. And Bradley was talking about that sense of finality. Do you think that's going to drive them to realize the importance of the regular season and to take the grind, to be able to? But the odd thing about it, 2 young guys, they learn how to win on the road before they learn how to win at home.
It is odd. It is odd. It's hard to explain, but you know, it's like it's cliche, but I'm going to take it to another level because there's no substitution for experience. And there's no substitution for being humbled. There's no substitution for what they just went through. You can't teach that. You got to go through it. And if you think about when LeBron James started making the playoffs with Cleveland, he learned he couldn't do it by himself. How much better of a player did he become? And he's the best in the game. But he also learned how to refine his game. He also learned what the playoffs are about. If anything, to me, John and Bradley learned that, you know what, in the playoffs, you're going to get fouled on every play. So there's certain things you can and can't do. And those are the things you have to go through. Right. LeBron did. So, and if he did, you know, there's no shortcuts.
Now, in terms of the offseason, You on the inside. Do they try to bring Ariza and Gortat back?
You do, but you got to you got to balance it out. You got to see what else is out there. You got to weigh the free agency market. Ariza has proven that he is a great three-point shooter, and he's one of the top defensive. I think he's an all-defensive player in the NBA. So, and he's coming off the best year of his career. So, you got to think about his age. You got to think about who else is out there. I think you have to sign Gortat. I think there's no maybe set. You have to sign him. I would like to sign Ariza. But, there's a mathematical equation in there that's called money, and you got to balance that.
And lastly, Glenn, two-part. I mean, you were here the last time they made the playoff run, but the makeup of this team seemed like it's more constituted for the long haul because of the maturity level of the two guys out in front.
No question. And the maturity of Nene and Gortat. This team's a little different. It's built a little differently. It's built on youth, but you also have the veteran players. And you know what? Kudos to Andre Miller. Kudos to Drew Gooden. Kudos to Al Harrington. Those guys help win games in the playoffs. So you always need that veteran presence. And I expect hopefully some of those guys will be back. If not, you bring other guys that could help these young guys.
How great has it been for you, buddy? You have to go into all the lean years to get a chance to grow and see these guys reach the levels that they have in such a short period of time.
It's been wonderful because to see guys like Bradley Beal and John just evolve as players. You can't teach the feel of the game. It takes time to learn that, and just to see those guys get better, and to see that, what impressed me most about this team, post All-Star break on the defensive end, they became a very good defensive team. Beginning of the season, they were a pretty good offensive team, but in the second half of the season, post All-Star break, all of a sudden, you always hear that term chemistry on offense. You saw the chemistry on defense, and that's what got them as far as that they can go. And you know what? A couple of bounces here and there. They make threes in this game. They're in the Eastern Conference Finals.
And lastly, buddy, I'll have you broaden your analyst hat. We talked about the schizophrenic nature of the Wizards not being able to win it on home and road, but what do you make of the Pacers? After what they've gone through, are they ready to try to contend with the champions?
It's a bizarre team. I mean, that's a bizarre team, man. But I will tell you this: they're mature. And everyone says they're fragile. Well, let me ask you a question. How fragile are they after getting blown out in Indiana, coming here and winning? So they're not as fragile as people think. They're a physical team. I still think, and I said this during the season when they were the best team in the Eastern Conference, I said this during the season, I still think they need a point guard that could organize and settle them down. George Hill is a very good player, but he's a combo guard, very good defensive player, and there's no knock on George Hill. But he's not an organizing point guard. I think they still need that, but we'll see how far they go against the Heat now.
We'll talk about the best. You're the best in the business, buddy. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right.